And good evening. Tonight, President Biden vowing to arm Ukraine even more as the country's capital city falls under attack once again. New video showing a missile strike hitting a pedestrian bridge in Kyiv. Dozens of rockets raining down on the capital city in just 24 hours, including this one, landing right next to a playground. Russia again accused of escalating attacks on civilian targets. The ruthless campaign in response to this weekend's explosion on a bridge linking Russia to Crimea. Putin has blamed Ukraine for the attack, which Kyiv has denied. Both sides getting additional backing today. Belarus's president saying he has ordered his troops to deploy with Russian forces near Ukraine. And President Biden speaking with Ukraine's president to condemn the recent attacks on Kyiv, adding the U.S. will provide Ukraine with advanced air defense systems. Also today, the websites of more than a dozen U.S. airports briefly taken offline. Russian-speaking hackers claiming responsibility. Air travel was not disrupted. We have a team on the ground in Moscow, but we begin tonight with Cal Perry, who leads us off from Kyiv.
Tonight, Kyiv is a city once again under fire. After this weekend's explosion on the bridge linking Russia to occupied Crimea, a vital supply line for the Russians and symbol of Putin's occupation there. Russia's president saying today's barrage of violence across more than a dozen Ukrainian cities is, quote, retaliation for that bridge explosion, though Ukraine has not taken responsibility for it. More than 84 rockets and 24 drones fired into Ukraine today. The attacks hitting the capital for the first time in months, striking many residential areas, a pedestrian bridge, and a children's playground.
The power of these explosions is immediately evident when you come here to the scene. The rockets landing at the height of rush hour as people were just headed to work. It ruins what was calm in this city because at this hour, there are still residents in bomb shelters hoping that the worst is over.
Ukraine says it shot down nearly half the rockets using military air defenses.
We need anti-rocket system. Safety right now the main priority, and that's why we tell to our partners, please, we have to defend our citizens.
President Zelensky releasing a video moments after the first rockets fell. A dual purpose, a message and proof of life. Russia has in the past tried to kill the Ukrainian leader. They deliberately chose such a time, he says, such goals in order to cause as much harm as possible. Ukraine's energy infrastructure crippled. After this latest round of strikes, rolling blackouts are already underway, and beginning Tuesday, the country will halt all energy exports. Erin McLaughlin is in the eastern city of Kharkiv.
It's nightfall here in Kharkiv, and the power's still out. As you can see, there's no light. This bus is just stuck here. And this is what many Ukrainians say they fear most: the cold, the dark, and the coming winter.
A winter approaching quickly as civilians take cover once again.
Cal Perry joins us now from Kyiv. Cal, the U.S. has already given billions in aid to Ukraine. President Biden and President Zelensky speaking today. What does Ukraine need the most?
Yeah, so according to President Zelensky, it's better and more of those air defense systems that are trying to protect the very civilians who are now hunkered into those subways looking for cover. President Biden saying that he would make it a priority that Ukraine will receive those more advanced air defense systems. This has long been a priority for Ukraine, Tom, and it's a day like today that makes it obvious why.
And I want to talk about another major development we're seeing from over here in the U.S. Late today, Belarus's president announcing a joint military task force with Russia along Ukraine's western border. What's the concern here? Because from the get-go, Russian troops were being housed in that country. What makes this different?
Yeah, and you'll remember this when you were here. There were fears that there could be an invasion from the north, and there are still fears of that. It could outflank where the Ukrainians are right now. When you talk to people, though, Tom, there's a great deal of optimism about what Ukrainian forces are doing in the southern part of the country and in the eastern part of the country, beating those Russian troops back, almost pushing them across the border. And so when you talk to people here, they're a little bit resistant about the idea of an invasion coming from the north, but at the same time, they tell you they think they're ready to handle it. And again, when you look at the way the Russians were pushed back from the capital here, there's a great deal of confidence that even if Belarus was to enter the conflict, they would not have the military power to overtake the Ukrainian forces here, Tom.
All right, Cal Perry leading us off tonight from Kyiv. Cal, we appreciate it. These strikes in Ukraine following a major structural change to Russian military leadership. A battle-hardened general now overseeing Russian forces. This new general, infamously known for his unrelenting attacks on civilian targets in Syria. Keir Simmons is in Moscow tonight.
Tonight, what President Putin called a massive strike on Ukraine, applauded by loyalists like Dmitry Medvedev, once a Western-friendly Russian leader who shared burgers with President Obama and tested an iPhone with Steve Jobs. Today, he again called for dismantling Ukraine's political regime. In Putin's world now, any moderate voices are silent, and many ordinary Russians anxious.
People are worried about the situation in the city and in the country.
This morning's attacks follow Putin's appointment of hardline General Sergei Surovikin, Russia's new commander of the war in Ukraine. He was once jailed after pro-democracy protesters were killed on his watch during an attempted coup in 1991. More recently, General Surovikin was the commander on the ground in Syria when Aleppo was leveled. We liquidated the terrorists, he then told President Putin. Now Putin is calling Ukrainian leaders terrorists. This morning's strikes, the newly appointed general's first act. His arrival celebrated by other powerful hardliners like Yevgeny Prigozhin, also known as Putin's chef because he supplied food to the Kremlin. Seen here recruiting prisoners for his private army, the Wagner Group. And Chechen warlord Ramzan Kadyrov, who recently posted this video of his teenage sons firing automatic weapons and grenade launchers, saying he was sending them to Ukraine.
Keir Simmons joins us now from Moscow. Keir, today may mark a change in President Putin's offensive in Ukraine, but can it be sustained? We saw how his draft was protested in pockets of Russia.
Yeah, you know, there are two parts to that question, Tom, and they're good questions. One is, have we seen a change in Russia's offensive approach? We don't know, but I think it's quite possible. President Putin appointed a new general to oversee that campaign in Ukraine over the weekend. Is there going to be a difference? And then, as you say, can it be sustained? Do they have the munitions to sustain it? And can they sustain those 300,000 men being called in that draft? Some are going willingly, some not so much. And of course, there are all those families, sons, brothers, fathers, who are waiting for their loved ones to come home. There are so many things changing here, Tom, and frankly, by the week, by the month, even by the day.
And I guess that leads to my next question. If this tactic fails for Vladimir Putin, given the pressure he's already facing, which you just mentioned there, what are the concerns on how Putin and his hardliners may react?
Well, exactly. I mean, he's surrounded by hardliners now, and they are all in, if you like, on this strategy just to continue. President Biden last week talked about whether there was an off-ramp for President Putin. Well, frankly, what President Putin is doing is ramping things up. He's not looking for an off-ramp at all, and that's partly because of the people, those hardliners that are around him. I can't answer the question, Tom. What do they do if it doesn't work? And yet, of course, there is a real possibility that it will not.
So, Keir, you've been reporting from Russia throughout this conflict. Any changes you've noticed now, nearly 8 months into this war?
You know something? A lot of this is so much about television. I've really noticed the changes on the television. So I can't tell you. Over the weekend, that attack on the bridge, the explosion and the damage, that was on Russian television all the time. I have not seen coverage like that since the start of the so-called special military operation back in February. And even now, there are images of those attacks in Ukraine, that bombing in Ukraine, those targets on Russian television. The Russian people are getting a clearer picture in some ways of what's really happening, and there is more criticism. Again, the question is, what does President Putin do with all that looking ahead?
Keir Simmons for us reporting from Moscow tonight. Keir, we thank you. We want to move on now to Central America to a story you may not have heard about. Hurricane Julia has now turned deadly. New video shows people in El Salvador, look at this, forming a human chain to try and rescue drivers trapped in floodwaters. At least 14 people killed that we know of across El Salvador and Honduras, including several soldiers. Homes also underwater in Nicaragua, where the storm made landfall there as a Cat 1 hurricane. Hundreds of thousands of people still without power. The system now weakening to a tropical storm, but it could regain strength and strike again. So I want to get right to NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill, the storm made landfall as a Cat 1, but the flooding that we're seeing there, it looks catastrophic, and the threat isn't over yet?
Yeah, that's why we tell people not to focus so much on the categories. I mean, categories only describe the wind. They have nothing to do whatsoever with the amount of rainfall that the system will produce. And from these images and pictures, this was the fear. You get the tropical system, either it's a tropical storm or a low-end hurricane, into mountainous areas, and you have huge issues. So it made landfall Saturday night in Nicaragua. Nicaragua towards the coast is kind of flat, but then the mountains go up to 4,000 to 6,000 feet. And then in El Salvador, they have mountain peaks that are up to 9,000 feet. So that tore the system apart. So Julia's no more. It's just a remnant low right now, but it's still producing just a ton of rainfall. And so what's actually happening, which is interesting, is a little piece of this storm has broken off to the north. There's thunderstorms just north of Belize. And the Hurricane Center actually thinks this has a slight chance to redevelop into its own system in the southern Gulf of Mexico. So you hear Gulf of Mexico, that gets everyone's attention from Texas to Florida. But this looks to drift more towards the coastline of Mexico over the next couple of days. So the biggest issue will be the heavy rain that will continue from this storm. And Tom, I think we're just beginning to see the devastation from this storm and the flooding. I think there'll be a lot more pictures coming out in the days ahead.
Yeah, and we're going to stay on top of this here on Top Story. As we move on now to the continental United States, what else are we looking at the forecast back home?
Yeah, the big story this week is just the big temperature swings, and then, unfortunately, we're going to have a lot of heavy rain in areas that don't want it this time of year. So tomorrow, we're up to 81 in Minneapolis. Say goodbye to summer weather after today. The cold front's going to slam through, and then you'll return to what you typically should be. And this cold front doesn't have a lot of rain with it. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we'll have thunderstorms sliding through areas from Memphis to Little Rock, also through the Ohio Valley. And then this big rainstorm is heading for the northeast, especially as we go throughout the Thursday evening rush hour. So if you have any airport plans or travel plans from New York northwards, that's going to be the issue. And Tom, here's the problem. The Leafs are at peak. They're absolutely gorgeous right now from Pennsylvania, New York City northwards. We're talking 2 to 4 inches of rain and windy conditions. A lot of people count on the money this time of year for the tourists heading northwards this upcoming weekend. Unfortunately, a lot of leaves are coming down with this rainstorm on Thursday.
All right, Bill Cairns for us. Bill, we appreciate it. Back here at home, right here in New York City, grappling with a surge of migrants. Many of them bust from Texas and Florida after crossing the southern border. The mayor declaring a state of emergency, now building a controversial tent city to temporarily house thousands seeking asylum. NBC News national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez reports.
Tonight, workers are scrambling to finish this new migrant tent camp in New York City after Mayor Eric Adams last week declared a state of emergency.
This is unsustainable.
The new construction comes after the city scrapped plans for another location due to flooding concerns. The camp is expected to temporarily house about 500 migrants for no more than 4 days each. The mayor says the city's burning through $1 billion this fiscal year on what he calls a humanitarian crisis. New buses like this one are arriving each day from Texas.
The tent city is horrible. It's just a repeat of what they're escaping right now.
With more than 2 million illegal border crossings this fiscal year and 17,000 asylum seekers bused to New York so far, Texas Governor Greg Abbott's office is calling Mayor Adams an absolute hypocrite, adding instead of fear-mongering and complaining about a few thousand migrants in his sanctuary city, Mayor Adams should call on President Biden to do his job and secure the border. After Florida Governor Ron DeSantis chartered a plane with migrants to Martha's Vineyard weeks ago, some Republicans are intensifying their campaign rhetoric ahead of this year's midterms.
Joe Biden's 5 million illegal aliens are on the verge of replacing you.
Norberto Orozco and his 2 teenage sons were bused here from Texas.
You didn't know that you were coming here. No sabía que iba a venir.
No sabía que venía aquí.
I didn't know, he tells us, adding he feels like a political pawn.
Fue duro venir.
Demasiado duro.
The trip from Venezuela was very hard, 14-year-old Ricardo says. It's unforgettable. It drives you crazy.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez joins us now. Gabe, we can see those tents there just behind you. How soon is it that tent city is expected to open up, and is it going to be enough to handle this new surge?
Well, Tom, this is expected to open in the next few days, but we don't know exactly when. And the city admits that this won't be enough to handle the migrant influx. Just several hundred migrants at a time will be housed here. And the city's looking at other options, potentially housing more migrants in hotels. And the city is also in talks to house some of them potentially on cruise ships, Tom.
And Gabe, you know, it's starting to get cold here in New York City, obviously. Too cold to sleep outside. How are they going to keep up with the weather with those tents?
You know, that's a very good question, Tom, and one that advocates for the homeless are asking. There was a clothing drive over the weekend where hundreds of migrants lined up for some warmer clothing. Many of them are from countries like Venezuela, and they're not used to this type of cold, but that is a major concern and one that the Adams administration is considering as we head into these colder months, Tom.
Okay, Gabe Gutierrez for us. Now to the growing controversy rocking a Los Angeles City Council board. The president of the LA City Council stepping down tonight after she was caught on an audio recording making racist remarks about a colleague's black son. The recordings made public over the weekend, leading to calls for her removal. NBC's Nyla Charles has more.
Tonight, the outrage continues across Los Angeles after leaked audio recordings were made public over the weekend, where you can hear Nury Martinez, the Los Angeles City Council president, making racist and revolting remarks about a black child and indigenous Mexican immigrants.
So you'll start seeing them line up.
Today, Martinez saying she's stepping down.
What else is she to do? Say I'm sorry? And then we all like, oh, okay. Just made a mistake calling people monkeys, and no, she would have to.
It's embarrassing, yeah. If she's representing the community and stuff, minorities and all such, she shouldn't be representing at all.
In the nearly 1 hour long recording spoken behind closed doors in 2021, you can hear Martinez joined by council member Kevin De Leon directing their attacks to fellow white council member Mike Bonin and his young black son.
There's nothing you can do to control him. And I'm just like, oh my God.
Martinez disparaging the toddler using the Spanish word for monkey, describing the moment Bonin joined a Martin Luther King Jr. parade float along with his son.
It's like the oddest thing. It's like black and brown on this float. And then there's this white guy with this little black kid who's misbehaved.
She goes on to joke that Bonin carried his adopted son as if he were a designer handbag, adding that he couldn't control him.
They're raising him like a little white kid, which I was like, this kid needs a beat down. Like, let me take him around the corner and then I'll bring him back.
The audio, originally posted anonymously on Reddit and first reported by the LA Times, has not been independently verified by NBC News, and we do not know if it has been edited. Bonin releasing a joint statement with his husband overnight, calling her statements anti-black and adding, "It hurts that one of our son's earliest encounters with overt racism comes from some of the most powerful public officials in Los Angeles." Also heard in the recordings, council member Gil Cedillo and Ron Herrera, president of the Country Federation of Labor, both not heard making overtly racist comments, but both releasing a statement. Cedillo saying he should have intervened, Herrera also apologizing for his failure to stand up to racist remarks.
The politics of Los Angeles, while they do reflect community building and coalition building and alliances, there are real differences between communities and what their needs are, and certainly redistricting tends to be very much a zero-sum game in which one group wins.
In the recordings, you can hear Martinez voicing her concern over losing economic strongholds in Latino districts, but then singling out LA's growing Oaxacan community that includes indigenous Mexican immigrants.
I see a lot of little short, dark people.
Yeah. That sets the terrain for xenophobia that affects Latino communities as well. Frank conversations around colorism in the Latino community.
Today, Martinez is doing an apology, saying in part, "I am sorry. I am truly ashamed."
All right, Nyla Charles joins us now live from Los Angeles City Hall tonight. Nyla, as you mentioned there, Martinez put out a statement today saying she was stepping down, but do we know if she's simply stepping down from that president position or is she vacating her city council seat?
Tom, Martinez is leaving that part pretty ambiguous. In her statement, she does specifically say she is resigning as the city council president, but she doesn't go on to say what she will do besides that. And then the mayor of LA also hasn't said anything in regards to whether or not she will be denounced from city council as a whole.
Well, I do want to ask you about that because the city's mayoral election is coming up. So Martinez has put her support behind one of the candidates. Are we hearing from them tonight?
Right, we are. There are two Democratic candidates. You have Rick Caruso, who's saying in addition to Martinez, he's also calling for De Leon and Cedillo, who are also council members on that call, to step down as well. And then you have the candidate that Martinez endorsed, Karen Bass. She's a black woman, also a Democrat. She's saying all 4 council members on the call should resign. Tom?
All right, now Charles with a lot of reporting for us tonight. We appreciate it. Now to the first day of the Harvey Weinstein trial there in L.A. as well. The disgraced film producer is already serving more than 2 decades behind bars in New York for sex crimes, but that case will be appealed. That places more importance and attention on this trial in L.A. Maura Barrett has more.
Tonight, Harvey Weinstein facing justice again. His second rape trial now underway in the city where he once reigned as Hollywood royalty.
This day is long overdue for Mr. Weinstein to appear in a Los Angeles County courtroom.
This comes 5 years after bombshell allegations against Weinstein ignited the Me Too movement. He's charged with 11 counts of rape and sexual assault, according to the indictment. Multiple survivors are expected to testify, including documentary filmmaker and actress Jennifer Siebel Newsom, who is also the wife of current California Governor Gavin Newsom. Weinstein has always maintained his innocence, pleading not guilty both in L.A. and New York, where he was convicted and sentenced to 23 years in prison for rape. The former media mogul was extradited to L.A. last summer. This trial takes on more significance now since Weinstein was granted an appeal in New York in August, to be taken up next year.
Weinstein has just a glimmer of a hope of getting his New York conviction overturned. If that happens, then he's back to 0 years in prison, and the LA trial may be the only trial that can hold him criminally responsible. The LA trial involves different victims, different interests, different jurisdiction, different vindication.
We spoke with actress Caitlin Delaney, who accused Weinstein of sexually harassing and assaulting her in the mid-90s. She's not involved in the LA trial.
When I heard about the appeal, I couldn't believe it, actually. It was devastating, devastating. And I was so upset and horrified.
What does it mean to you as a survivor to see him here on trial in LA?
It's very personal. It makes sense to have a Hollywood reckoning. This was such a prevalent thing in Hollywood, and powerful men were allowed to get away with this. There were women that were harmed everywhere, and I just feel there's so much at stake.
Jury selection began today. His lawyers were denied a delay of trial after arguing the upcoming release of the movie She Said, a Universal film, could influence the pool.
This is about the system protecting abusers.
The LA district attorney releasing a statement to NBC News, writing in part, "I want to assure every victim in Los Angeles that holding sexual assailants accountable, no matter their power, wealth, or status, is a priority in my office." Having gone through what you did, did you ever expect to see the culture shift that we have happen in your lifetime?
I'm so grateful that it did happen in my lifetime. Court cases will hopefully set the stage for future cases for sexual assault. There's still a lot of work to be done.
All right, Maura Barrett joins us now live from Los Angeles. So, Maura, I do want to talk about the trial first. And the prosecution's going to have some legal challenges here?
Yeah, Tom, this trial concerns 5 women with allegations dating as far back as 2004. Decades-old claims can be hard for both prosecution and defense lawyers to fact-check. And the prosecution is bringing in what are called prior bad acts, which is evidence not testified to by accusers themselves. This evidence is very limited in court, and it's easy to be challenged. That's exactly what we've seen with both Bill Cosby's case and Weinstein's New York appeal. This trial in L.A. is expected to last 2 months. Tom?
So the Me Too movement, it's been about 5 years old. It's been here in the ether for about 5 years. You spoke to a victim there, Caitlin Delaney. What does she think about the Me Too movement and what's happened since then?
We heard her react there, saying that she's grateful that it's happened in her lifetime, but she said that there's still a lot of work to be done, right? And the fact that trials are ongoing for high-profile names like Kevin Spacey and Danny Masterson at the same time, it's promising for her and other sexual assault survivors that I've spoken to. But according to RAINN, an anti-sexual violence organization, only 25 out of every 1,000 perpetrators of sexual assault end up in prison. Survivors want that number to go up.
All right, back now with Top Stories news feed, and we begin with an 18-year-old Marine recruit dying during a training in Southern California. Officials say Private First Class Javier Pong collapsed during the training at Camp Pendleton last month. The New Mexico native had just graduated high school in May. The cause of death is still under investigation. A massive fire destroyed a cross-country ski resort in Minnesota. New video shows the flames ripping through the Maple Lag Resort near Callaway. No one was injured, and so far no word yet on the cause. It's the second major fire to happen at the lodge. It was rebuilt after flames destroyed that resort back in 1999. The Coast Guard rescued 3 boaters from shark-infested waters in the Gulf of Mexico this weekend. The 24-foot boat capsized 25 miles off the coast of Empire, Louisiana. Rescuers searched an area the size of Rhode Island for survivors. As help arrived, 2 of those boaters were fighting off sharks. Both sustained injuries to their hands as they fought for their lives. The third rescued with signs of hypothermia. The Coast Guard crediting life jackets for their survival. And it turns out you may be able to put a price on love. Nearly a quarter of millennials say they are in debt from dating. A new survey by LendingTree found Americans spending an average of $90 per date as inflation impacts everything from flowers to food. 22% of respondents ages 26 to 41 say those high bills have left them in a financial hole. And 1 in 5 people said the prices have caused them to go on fewer dates. All right, we want to turn now to the search for a missing toddler in Georgia. The 1-year-old missing since last Wednesday. Dozens of FBI agents now joining the investigation. NBC's Morgan Chesky has the latest.
Tonight, the desperate search intensifies for missing toddler Quentin Simon, 5 days after the boy was first reported missing.
We are continuing to use every investigative resource available for us to locate little Quentin. We have conducted multiple interviews, executed multiple search warrants, and we've canvassed numerous specific geographic areas.
The lack of information bringing Quentin's grandmother to tears.
And I need everybody to help, everybody that knows anything, everybody. He's just a baby.
It was at her house in Chatham County, Georgia, that Quentin, just 20 months old, was last seen on Wednesday. He was living there along with his 2 siblings, his mother, Leilani Simon, her boyfriend, and Quentin's grandparents. Nearly 1 month ago, police were called to the residence over a fight between Leilani and her mother, Billy Jo. According to the police report, Leilani's brother said she had a history of stealing money to pay for drugs.
Because she's lied to us so many times. And I don't know, it's just bad to say, but she just likes to lie.
Leilani has not responded to the claims made by her brother. Billy Jo filed to have Leilani and her boyfriend evicted. The couple did not immediately leave. And then last Wednesday, the mysterious disappearance. Leilani's boyfriend, Daniel, the last person to see Quentin, according to police, left for work around 6 a.m. Just minutes after the boy's babysitter received a text saying she would not have to watch the little boy that day. She spoke exclusively to News Nation and WSAV.
And then I get a text at 9 o'clock saying, have I seen Quentin? I immediately go to their house. I try to help them look. They didn't want that. So I've just been waiting around like everybody else.
Finally, at 9:42 a.m., Mother Leilani called police reporting her son missing. NBC affiliate station WSAV revealing new audio of police dispatch from the day of Quentin's disappearance.
Complaint about her 1-year-old son is missing. She woke up, her door was open. Advising he's unable to open a door. Thinks someone came in and took him.
Since that day, Chatham County Police, along with more than 40 FBI agents, have combed the area, but so far have not turned up any new leads.
We believe with the continued assistance of the FBI, we will have a resolution to this case.
Police have yet to name a suspect in the disappearance. And for Quentin's family, each day without answers growing more and more heartbreaking. Morgan Chesky, NBC News.
All right. Also tonight, an update on a story we've been closely following. Nearly a month after a boil water notice was lifted in Jackson, residents there say they still can't drink the water, and now they're receiving sky-high water bills. Zincle Esamwa on the growing outrage.
For Virginia Evans, the water crisis in Jackson didn't just start. She's been struggling to fully pay her water bill for 6 years.
I went to the water company, and they were unable to give me any information. There's nothing that they could do to help me.
Evans says she stopped getting bills for 11 months. When she finally received one in 2017, costs accumulated, she says, to roughly $6,000.
What do you use the water for in your house?
I boil it, basically, to wash the dishes. We do the laundry, and sometimes I water the plants.
But that's it?
That's it.
In Jackson, some residents tell NBC News they're facing inflated bills for water they can't drink or use.
It is heavy.
Today, the city runs the water system and handles billing. In 2010, Siemens Corporation installed new water meters and created a new billing system. Some residents say this is when billing issues began. The city sued Siemens in 2019, alleging that at least 10,000 of the 60,000 new meters were not functioning correctly, resulting in unpaid accounts. Siemens settled for $90 million. Siemens did not acknowledge wrongdoing, and the company says it worked with the city to address challenging issues. Last week, frustration boiled over.
$1,310 water bill for a widow woman that's 82 years old. Get one check a month. Come on here.
Councilman Kenneth Stokes leading a community meeting where some individuals say their water bills surpassed $17,000. The mayor's office says inconsistent billing is due to water meter and billing software problems. Each issue is being handled on a case-by-case basis.
Should residents be paying these water bills that some are saying are inaccurate for water that may be unsafe?
No, they should. Why should you pay for water you can't drink? It's not right.
Councilman Stokes now urging for more to be done.
You can't allow state to not make sure water is safe, clean, and drinkable. You can't do that.
As for Virginia Evans, she's still making water bill payments, though unsure if she'll ever be able to pay off her balance.
I can't pay $6,000, and this is impossible.
Zinklea Samoa, NBC News, Jackson, Mississippi.
All right, next to the growing pressure President Biden is under with gas prices rising, with the midterm elections just 4 weeks away. It comes after a decision by Saudi Arabia to slash oil production. NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell has more tonight on the political fallout.
The Saudi announcement a blow to American consumers and a gut punch to President Biden, despite his fist bump summit with the Saudi crown prince, when the administration thought they could get a deal to keep production up and prices low before the midterms.
I was able to bring gasoline down well over $1.60, but it's inching up because of what the Russians and the Saudis just did.
Now even Democrats blasting that Riyadh summit and calling for the U.S. to withdraw troops from Saudi Arabia. You would punish Saudi Arabia?
I would reconsider why we provide for the security of a country that seems to have no concern for the security of ours and our allies.
That's because raising oil prices produces more oil profits for Vladimir Putin's war machine. The White House now scrambling to bring prices down. One option, release more oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, but it's dangerously low. The president has already released more than 200 million barrels this year. Another possibility, lift sanctions on Venezuela so it can pump more oil. But that country's strongman, Nicolas Maduro, has still not delivered on democratic reforms or pressure U.S. oil companies to keep prices down. Is any of this going to work?
They've sort of run out of bullets. U.S. producers won't listen to them. The Saudis won't listen to them again. It really is, at its core, a supply issue. He has to find somebody who's going to pump more, and nobody wants to do that right now.
The problem for the White House, most of the solutions are long-term, which won't help them for the midterms.
Andrea Mitchell, we appreciate it. Coming up, tsunami warning, the volcanic eruption caught on camera in Italy. Why there's now concern for residents who live along the coast. Stay with us. Now to top stories Global Watch. North Korea continuing its barrage of weapons tests over the weekend. North Korea firing 2 short-range ballistic missiles towards its eastern waters on Sunday, just hours after U.S. and South Korea conducted Navy drills off the Korea Peninsula. North Korea also warning the U.S. against redeploying the aircraft carrier, the USS Ronald Reagan. And a volcanic eruption in Italy triggering a mini tsunami. New video shows the moment the Stromboli volcano off the coast of Sicily erupted this morning, sending plumes of ash into the sky. It also sent lava into the sea, creating seismic waves that were registered by the tsunami warning system. No one was hurt, but the island's 600 residents were asked to stay indoors with windows and doors closed. All right, now to Iran and the weeks-long anti-government protests that only seem to be growing. We get the latest from NBC's Ali Arouzi, the only Western broadcast journalist now in Iran.
Protests and violence continue in Iran, where for weeks demonstrators have been taking to the streets, erupting into anti-government slogans. Iranian security forces and militia clamping down, firing shots and tear gas, beating back protesters. Today, workers at refineries joined the protests, sparked by last month's death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, taken into custody by the morality police for failing to fully adhere to the country's strict dress code. She died 3 days later. Officials deny any wrongdoing and claim she died of a pre-existing condition. The flames of anger show no signs of ebbing as international condemnation grows against Iran as several governments discuss sanctions. The UK is joining the US in sanctioning senior security officials and Iran's morality police for repression of women. Demonstrations across the country are now being led by fearless and determined young Iranians, with women and schoolgirls often at the helm, waving their hijabs defiantly in the air. This weekend, the flagship news program on Iranian state TV was apparently hacked. And the president of Iran's visit to a women's university backfired when he was heckled by students. An unheard of act of defiance in this country. At another university in Tehran, students painted their hands red in a show of solidarity for students that have been arrested or injured since the unrest began. Protesters seem more emboldened, fearless, chanting, "We're not scared of your tanks and bullets." But authorities keep issuing stern warnings. The Deputy Interior Minister saying harsh sentences will be handed down to demonstrators as a deterrent.
Ali Arouzi for us tonight. Ali, we appreciate it. Coming up, the heart-stopping nightmare for two parents. Their car stolen with their 2-year-old inside. The hero bus drivers coming to the rescue and saving the infant, and it's all captured on video. That's next. Finally tonight, the incredible rescue of a 2-year-old in Michigan. A thief stealing a woman's car with her son still inside. The mother's terrifying plea caught on camera as her town's bus drivers answered the call to action. Here's NBC's Maggie Vespa.
It's every parent's worst nightmare. Newly released surveillance video from last week's incident shows a panicked Michigan mother pleading for help. Her car had just been stolen with her 2-year-old baby still inside. Taken as she dropped off her other child at the bus stop. That's when school bus driver Dave Skinner leapt into action, calling 911. But he didn't stop there. Dave jumped on the radio to alert other bus drivers to look for the car and baby.
It was kind of like shocking. You just sat there and like, did he really just say that? Did that really just happen?
That's when another driver, Sue Figueroa, saw this. A baby boy sitting alone on the side of the road.
He was crying and I was just overwhelmed.
Scared, the boy tries to run away, but Sue extends her arms to the child, managing to get him safely onto the bus.
Anywhere from 4 to 6 minutes. That mom didn't know, but probably the longest 4 to 6 minutes of her life.
And then, finally. The baby left just a few blocks away by the car thief, tearfully embracing his mother.
He's okay. He's okay. He's okay.
I was crying all day. It was very emotional. I was very relieved.
Police say the car was found in a nearby town and no arrests have been made. For Dave, he said it was all just part of the job.
Drivers are very attentive to all the kids in the neighborhoods when we're picking them up. And if they see something odd or strange, I mean, they're real quick to get on the radio and holler back.
Dave's quick thinking and Sue's swift action turning these drivers into heroes.
I'm just glad her kid's home safe. You know, cars are replaceable, but I'm glad her child's home.
Maggie Vespa, NBC News.
All right, that does it for us. Thanks so much for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.